our next question is on Kashmir. So Article 370 gave Kashmir a modicum of autonomy while paradoxically extending New Delhi's grip over Kashmir. The recent reading down of the article is clearly a case of New Delhi's aggression against Kashmiris. The discussion that followed within Liberal Center is exclusively on the need to restore Article 370. While that is important, given the humiliation that reading down of Article 370 has inflicted on the Kashmiris, we see a narrowing down of the Kashmiri conversation to the sole issue of Article 370. As a result, the larger questions on freedom, military excesses, and right to self-determination have gone out of discussion tables. As someone who has spoken for rights of oppressed people, the Palestinian people, for instance, what is your take on the relative absence of Kashmir in conversations within the global left? And secondly, what is your message to the people of India who considers any substantive discussion on Kashmir to be a seditious act of anti-nationalism?
The Modi government's sharp extension of severe Indian repression in Kashmir, they didn't begin it, but they sharply extended it to essentially taking over Kashmir, much the way Israel took over Palestine. It's rather similar, or Morocco took over Western Sahara with US support. These are all similar. They're all criminal acts, very severe. You can say that others are involved too. Pakistan's record is ugly and brutal, but nothing comparable to what India has been doing, particularly since the fraudulent elections of the late 80s and the sharply increased repression. Modi's carried it far further. Kashmir is partially repressed, occupied territory. This should be totally intolerable to the international community. Obviously, it's not, just as the crushing of Palestine is not, just as the illegal takeover of Western Sahara is not. Governments are not humanitarian organizations. They support power interests. Compare the power of Kashmiris to the power of India. Okay, you have the answer. It was the same in other cases. But these things can be won. There are some amazing cases. One of the greatest imbalances in modern times, which has been won by the victims, is the Indonesian invasion of East Timor. US-backed Indonesian invasion, backed by the Western countries, overwhelmingly the United States. Speak of imbalance. This is 600,000 people who nobody ever heard of. Indonesia, major power, huge resources, a darling of the West since 1965, when the ultra-right took over, carried out extraordinary massacre, killed hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people. It just became the absolute darling of the West, of investment community and so on, huge resources. And then, of course, the United States gave them the green light to go and invade East Timor and destroy it and take it over. It's the worst genocide relative to population since the World War. How could the Timorese possibly resist? I mean, press refused to cover it. Nobody would talk about it. But it worked. With 25 years of hard, dedicated effort, it was possible to get a popular reaction, possible to compel Washington to call the troops off. Enough pressure on Clinton in 1999, so he quietly gave the Indonesian government the order to say, it's over, get your troops out. And of course, they instantly obeyed. That's what power is. Well, not saying that's identical to Kashmir, but it's enough to show that things can be done with hard, dedicated labor. This is perhaps the most extreme example I've ever seen. I was personally involved in it for many years, but it seemed hopeless, totally hopeless, outlandish, but it worked. And I think popular activism can have an effect, maybe a decisive effect, in the Kashmir situation too. I think the Timur case is a good example to show things aren't hopeless. Even in an example like that, with overwhelming power imbalance, whole world virtually supporting Indonesia, including the third world. But it worked.